Everything changed in a matter of seconds. One pivotal move, and an entire defensive empire began to crumble from the inside out. Welcome to NFL Nexus. I'm your host, and today we're going to meticulously break down a gridiron catastrophe. But before we get into it, if you want to understand the modern game at a microscopic level, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this explainer, and drop a comment down below with your thoughts. And hey, support the channel by becoming a channel member. It really helps us keep doing these deep dives. Okay, let's dive right into this. We're looking at the anatomy of the 2025 Pittsburgh Steelers defense. This isn't just a story about a team missing the mark. No, it's a cinematic look at exactly how delicate the ecosystem of a professional football defense truly is. We're going to examine the highest-paid defensive unit in the entire National Football League, a unit that was supposed to be completely impenetrable, and we're going to dissect exactly how and why they suffered such a severe, system-wide collapse.
So what happens when the highest-paid defense in the NFL loses its absolute anchor? Seriously, think about the sheer magnitude of that payroll for a second. We are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars invested into a single side of the football. This was a unit built to terrorize quarterbacks, to dictate the very geometry of the gridiron, to forcefully impose their will on every single down. And yet, the reality of the 2025 Pittsburgh season was a grim, harsh wake-up call. When you build a defense on the premise of elite, superstar talent masking underlying systemic vulnerabilities, the removal of just one crucial piece can cause the entire structure to cave in on itself. The front office made a decision, a calculated risk, and the consequences echoed through every single snap of the 2025 campaign. It is a terrifying reality for a defensive coordinator watching a high-priced fortress completely unravel right in front of your eyes.
The result on the field was undeniable, and quite frankly, hard to watch. Chunk plays, miscommunication, collapse. All of that exorbitant payroll resulted in glaring, fatal weaknesses. We saw opposing offenses dialing up deep, explosive chunk plays. You know the ones, those back-breaking yards that completely demoralize a defensive line that just spent the last 5 seconds fighting for their lives in the trenches. We saw constant, agonizing miscommunications. You could literally see it on the broadcast. Players looking around pre-snap, throwing their hands up, completely out of sync, failing to pass off crossing routes. A defense that was once heralded for its ironclad discipline became a unit defined by its vulnerability. This wasn't just a bad stretch of games, guys. This was a fundamental collapse of defensive integrity.
Section 1. The Peyton Wilson Problem, a sophomore slump in the middle.
To truly understand this structural failure, we have to look at the specific casualties on the roster. We have to look at the regression of an emerging star. As a rookie, Peyton Wilson, this speedy, former third-round pick out of North Carolina State, he looked like the absolute future of the position. He was heralded for his incredible athletic gifts, his raw instincts, and his relentless sideline-to-sideline motor. Going into his sophomore season, the expectations weren't just high, they were astronomical. He was supposed to take the leap from a promising rookie to a foundational centerpiece. But instead, we witnessed a deeply concerning sophomore slump. Now, on the surface, if you just casually glance at the stat sheet, you might be incredibly confused. Peyton Wilson's 2025 output doesn't really look like a slump at first glance. He racked up a massive 126 combined tackles. He recorded 6 tackles for loss, and perhaps most importantly, he earned significantly increased trust from the coaching staff, which meant his role was vastly expanded compared to his rookie year. But in the modern NFL, raw tackle volume can be a dangerous mirage. You have to look at the smallest details. If a linebacker is making 126 tackles, but the majority of them involve dragging down tight ends 8 yards past the line of scrimmage, the defense is bleeding out. You have to look at where those tackles are being made, and more importantly, what happens when he's asked to do his true bread and butter, drop back into pass coverage. Because when we isolate his coverage stats, a much darker, much more concerning story begins to unfold.
The horrific drop-off is absolutely undeniable when you dig into the raw coverage data. And this brilliantly illustrates the core issue. In his rookie season, he prided himself on being an elite coverage guy. He was targeted 39 times and allowed a highly respectable 79 passer rating. That is the exact kind of lockdown inside linebacker play that defensive coordinators dream about at night. But then, as you shift your attention to the 2025 season, the contrast is jarring. He was only targeted 6 more times, 45 targets in total. But the damage done on those targets was absolutely catastrophic. He gave up 351 yards when dropping back, and that passer rating allowed skyrocketed to 104.7. The speed was still there. The athletic gifts were still there. So how does a player known as a capable coverage linebacker suddenly become a glaring liability the second the ball is in the air? 104.7. Let that number just sit with you for a second. When an inside linebacker allows a 104.7 passer rating, it means he isn't just getting beat on a lucky play. It means opposing offensive coordinators have circled his number in the film room all week long. It means elite quarterbacks are actively diagnosing the coverage pre-snap, locating Peyton Wilson in the middle of the field and absolutely hunting him. Imagine the exact microscopic scenario on the gridiron. An opposing offense dials up a pre-snap motion from a shifty slot receiver specifically designed to isolate Wilson in space. The quarterback identifies the mismatch instantly. He knows Wilson is vulnerable right now. He knows the middle of the field is soft. It is a massive severity of failure in the most critical area of the football field. In today's pass-happy league, if your inside linebacker is bleeding yardage like this, it completely compromises your third down packages. It forces the defensive play caller into a constant state of panic, always having to scheme up ways to protect a player who is supposed to be the one doing the protecting.
Section 2. The missing ghost, the catalyst for the collapse. So, we're forced to ask the critical question. Why? Why did a budding star, a player with literally all the physical tools in the world, regress so drastically in the span of a few short months? Well, the answer doesn't actually lie in Peyton Wilson's physical abilities at all. The answer lies in the empty space behind him. We have to shift our narrative to the root cause of the defense's misdirection. We're looking for a missing ghost in the secondary. Listen to this quote from Christopher Carter of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He said, "They had Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think without his presence out there was a bit of a lack as far as like a coach on the field who could help put people in the right places, understand what they were supposed to do, and help them lock in." That phrase right there, a coach on the field, carries immense weight. It is the absolute highest compliment you can give an NFL safety. It means before the ball is even snapped, while the quarterback is barking out audibles and the receivers are shifting in motion, there is one man in the deep third of the field processing the entire matrix, communicating the adjustments, and physically aligning his linebackers. When you lose that, you literally lose the brain of your defense.
Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds, because the anatomy of this disaster follows a very clear sequence of events. Pre-2025 season, in a shocking front office move, three-time first-team All-Pro Minkah Fitzpatrick is traded away to the Miami Dolphins. Fitzpatrick wasn't just a player, he was the very cornerstone of Pittsburgh's most dominant defenses over the last few years. Immediately, as the 2025 season kicks off, the safety room feels the structural effects. They are missing one of the best to ever do it. And as the season progresses, a horrifying trend emerges. Turnovers completely drop off a cliff. Fitzpatrick had this incredible knack for creating turnovers that bailed this team out and kept them in games. Without him, the defense stays on the field longer, deep fatigue sets in, and the linebackers, now operating without their ultimate safety net, are brutally exposed. Section 3. The ripple effect. Exposed in the middle.
It's truly fascinating how one single front office move, a trade that happened miles away in a boardroom, cascades down directly onto the turf to negatively impact a sophomore linebacker's coverage stats. Football is the ultimate game of interconnected responsibilities. It's like a giant puzzle. You pull one thread out of a sweater, and suddenly the entire sleeve falls off. By removing Fitzpatrick from the deep middle, the Steelers unknowingly stripped Peyton Wilson of the structural support he relied on to process the game at high speed. So the crucial point is understanding the exact microscopic mechanics of this domino effect. Step 1, the loss of the ultimate safety valve. Fitzpatrick covered so much ground that he naturally picked up the slack of other players making mistakes. Step 2, the pre-snap alignment and leadership disappear. Without his commanding presence over the top, players like Wilson didn't have someone instantly helping them read the complex offensive shell and lock in before the snap. But step 3, this is where the structure truly breaks, because the new safeties are most effective playing towards the line of scrimmage rather than playing a true deep center field, the entire geometry of the defense compresses. Think about it. When safeties cheat down by even 2 or 3 yards pre-snap, the windows for crossing routes behind the linebackers double in size. The throwing lanes that a quarterback sees suddenly turn from tight keyholes into massive glaring corridors. And that leads directly to step 4, the fatal blow. Linebackers are left completely, terrifyingly isolated in coverage. When your safeties are playing closer to the box, those massive seams in the middle of the field crack wide open. Peyton Wilson suddenly found himself on an absolute island, covering elite tight ends and slot receivers running deep over the middle with absolutely zero help over the top. The margin for error went from comfortable to non-existent. A half step of hesitation meant a blown coverage, and without Minkah back there to erase the mistake, it resulted in a 30-yard chunk play every single time.
Let's formally define what we mean here, just so we're all on the same page. Safety valve. A reliable deep field defender who erases mistakes, dictates alignment, and allows linebackers like Wilson to play aggressively without fear. That psychological element, playing without fear, is literally everything for a young linebacker who is trying to process a million variables at once. In his rookie year, Wilson knew that if he jumped an underneath route and guessed wrong, Fitzpatrick was looming in the shadows to break up the deep pass. That security blanket allowed Wilson to play fast, instinctive, violent football. In 2025, that blanket was ripped away. Wilson had to think twice. He had to play tentatively. He was constantly worried about getting beat deep because he knew, deep down, there was no ghost in the secondary coming to save him anymore. The numbers plummeted not because his legs got slower, but because the psychological freedom to play aggressive football was entirely gone.
Section 4. Rebuilding the Middle. The Year 3 Ultimatum.
But look, the NFL stops for no one, and the past is exactly that, the past. We have to pivot to the future and the astronomical stakes for the upcoming training camp. The Steelers are entering the lab this offseason with a new defensive staff and a brand new scheme. It's a clean slate for sure, but it's also an ultimatum. You cannot have the highest paid defense in the league crumbling from the inside out for 2 years in a row. They desperately need to rebuild the middle of the field, and the burden of that reconstruction falls heavily and almost unfairly right back onto the shoulders of number 51. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer weight of the tasks Peyton Wilson must conquer to survive this offseason. Just look at his 2026 checklist. First, he has to return to his bread and butter, lock down the middle of the field. He has to rediscover that rookie magic, even with that Fitzpatrick behind him. The improved black and gold offense is going to give him a fantastic opportunity to practice against elite competition in camp, but he has to execute. Second, he must take the next step and become a complete player by improving against the run game. He can't just be a niche coverage guy anymore. He needs to be a true three-down enforcer who meets running backs in the hole with absolute authority. And finally, the heaviest burden of all. He must step up and become the outright leader of an inside linebacker room that is dangerously thin right now. The days of relying on a veteran safety to align him pre-snap are completely over. He has to step up and become the coach on the field himself.
Which leaves us with this final lingering question. Can Peyton Wilson finally step out of Minkah Fitzpatrick's immense shadow, separate himself as one of the league's absolute best in his niche, and become the leader this defense so desperately needs? Or is the middle of the field permanently lost? The stakes for this upcoming training camp could not possibly be higher. The entire structural integrity of this defense hangs in the balance. This isn't over yet. Thank you so much for joining me on NFL Nexus for this deep dive into the tape. If you appreciate this cinematic breakdown and want to see more, please support the channel by becoming a channel member, subscribe to the channel, like the explainer, and definitely comment on what you thought down below. Do you think Peyton Wilson can bounce back this year? Let me know. I'll see you in the next explainer.